For decades, fans have been asking one question. One burning, relentless, never going away question. Why hasn't Back to the Future happened yet? Think about it. We live in a world where every beloved franchise gets rebooted, remade, or revived. Star Wars came back. Jurassic Park came back. Indiana Jones came back. Even Top Gun came back after 36 years. But Back to the Future? Silence. No sequel. No reboot. No recast. No announcement trailer. Nothing. And the more you dig into why, the more you realize this isn't just Hollywood politics or scheduling conflicts. This is something far more intentional, far more emotional, and honestly, far more fascinating. Buckle up, because today we're setting the coordinates, firing up the flux capacitor, and going deep into the real story behind why Back to the Future 4 will never, and I mean never, happen. To understand why this decision carries so much weight. You first have to understand just how enormous this franchise really is. Cast your mind back to July 3rd, 1985. A DeLorean tears across a parking lot at 88 miles per hour, sparks fly, flames erupt from the tire tracks, and just like that, cinema was never the same again. Back to the Future didn't just become a hit movie. It became a cultural earthquake. Directed by Robert Zemeckis and produced by Steven Spielberg's Amblin Entertainment, the film told the story of Marty McFly, a teenager from Hill Valley, California, who accidentally travels back in time to 1955 in a time machine built by his eccentric scientist best friend, Dr. Emmett Brown. And in doing so, he risks erasing his own existence. It sounds simple on paper, but the execution? Flawless. Michael J. Fox brought Marty McFly to life with a kind of effortless charm that made audiences fall completely in love with him. And Christopher Lloyd's portrayal of Doc Brown? Absolutely iconic. Wild-eyed, brilliant, passionate, and deeply human beneath all that wild hair. Doc Brown became one of the greatest characters in cinema history. Full stop. The chemistry between Fox and Lloyd wasn't just good on screen. It was electric. It was the kind of connection you can't manufacture, can't script, can't fake. It was real, and audiences felt every second of it. The first film was a phenomenon, a genuine, once-in-a-generation phenomenon. It grossed over $381 million worldwide on a budget of just $19 million. It was the highest-grossing film of 1985. It swept award nominations, dominated pop culture, and planted itself permanently into the hearts of an entire generation. And then came the sequels. Back to the Future Part 2 took us soaring into the year 2015. Hoverboards, self-lacing shoes, flying cars, and a vision of the future that still sparks debate today about what it got right and what it got wrong. Part 3 swept us into the Wild West, giving the franchise a love story, a showdown, and a send-off that felt both surprising and deeply satisfying. By the time the trilogy wrapped in 1990, it had collectively grossed over $936 million worldwide. 3 films, 3 completely different time periods, 1 perfectly interwoven story. This wasn't just a movie trilogy. This was lightning in a bottle 3 times in a row. And when something becomes that beloved, the world never really lets it go. For over 3 decades now, fans have been campaigning, petitioning, tweeting, and dreaming about a 4th installment. The conversation never died. If anything, it grew louder with every passing year. Think about the timing. By the early 2000s, nostalgia culture was exploding. Legacy sequels were becoming Hollywood's safest bet. The money was clearly there. The fan base was still passionate. A new generation had discovered the trilogy through DVD re-releases, cable television, and eventually streaming. The demand was real, undeniable, commercially irresistible, at least on paper. And studio executives? They absolutely noticed. Universal Pictures, which holds the rights to the franchise, was reportedly eager to explore new possibilities with the property. Sources over the years have suggested that conversations happened, that offers were floated, but every single time, they ran directly into a wall. 2 men, specifically, writer-producer Bob Gale and director Robert Zemeckis, the original creators of the trilogy, both hold a rare and extraordinary thing in Hollywood: creative veto power over the franchise. And they have used that veto power with absolute, unwavering consistency. Every single time. So here's the question everyone wants answered. Why? Why would two men sit on one of the most valuable intellectual properties in Hollywood history and refuse, repeatedly, publicly, emphatically, to let it continue? The answer, when you hear it, is both simple and profound. Bob Gale has spoken about this more candidly than almost any other creator in Hollywood, and his reasoning cuts straight to the heart of what makes great storytelling great. In interview after interview, Gale has made his position crystal clear. The story is done. Completely. Intentionally. Permanently done. We want to tell one complete story. Gale has explained. The trilogy wasn't designed to be an ongoing franchise with open-ended threads. It was designed to be a beginning, a middle, and an end. 3 acts. A complete emotional journey. The final scene of Part 3, Marty and Jennifer reunited, Doc Brown arriving with a time train, Clara and the boys aboard, wasn't a cliffhanger. It was a goodbye. A warm, joyful, deeply satisfying goodbye. And Gale has been brutally honest about what he thinks a sequel would actually do to that legacy. In his words, a 4th film would inevitably damage everything the trilogy built. It would risk turning something timeless into something disposable. And neither he nor Zemeckis was willing to let that happen for any amount of money. But there's another layer to this story. A more personal, more emotional layer. Michael J. Fox, the irreplaceable face of this franchise, the man who is Marty McFly in the minds of millions, was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease back in 1991. He disclosed his diagnosis publicly in 1998, and over the years has been remarkably open about how the condition has progressed and how it has affected his life and his ability to work. Fox himself has addressed the idea of a 4th film with characteristic warmth and humor, but also with honesty. Reprising the role of Marty McFly in a meaningful, physical way is simply not something his health would allow. And the idea of recasting Marty McFly? Gale has shut that door just as firmly. There's only one Marty McFly, Gale once said, with the kind of quiet conviction that leaves absolutely no room for argument. When fans and journalists have pushed harder, asking whether any version of Part 4 could ever exist, Gale's response has been famously blunt and completely unambiguous. When I'm dead, he's been quoted as saying, not a maybe, not a never say never, just no. And somehow, that honesty makes you respect him all the more for it. But here's where the story takes a genuinely beautiful turn. Because the creators of Back to the Future didn't just lock the franchise in a vault and walk away. They found another way to let it live. A creative, unexpected, surprisingly wonderful other way. They said yes to Back to the Future, the musical. Now, if your first instinct was skepticism, fair enough. A lot of people felt that way initially. A stage musical based on a beloved sci-fi film trilogy? It sounded risky, even a little absurd. But the result was anything but. Back to the Future. The musical opened in Manchester in 2020, transferred to London's West End in 2021, and became a runaway critical and commercial success. It featured a brand new score, dazzling theatrical production design, and a faithful retelling of the original film's story with a kind of theatrical energy and joyfulness that audiences absolutely embraced. The production won the Olivier Award, the UK's highest theatrical honor, for Best New Musical in 2022. It transferred to Broadway, where it continued to captivate audiences who grew up with the films and entirely new generations discovering the story for the first time. And crucially, it didn't replace the movies. It didn't erase them or diminish them or ask audiences to accept a new Marty and Doc as the real Marty and Doc. It celebrated them in a completely different medium, in a way that honored the spirit of the original without trying to imitate or outshine it. Gale was directly involved in developing the musical and has spoken about it with genuine pride and enthusiasm. This, he suggested, is the right way for Back to the Future to continue. Through live performance, through storytelling, through the kind of shared, communal experience that theater has always provided. It's a masterclass in how to honor a legacy without exploiting it. Oh, here we are, 40 years after that DeLorean first blasted across our screens. For decades of fan devotion, cultural impact, and the kind of enduring love that most filmmakers could only ever dream of inspiring. And Back to the Future remains exactly what it was always meant to be. 3 perfect films, one complete story, an ending that actually ends. In an era when Hollywood too often mistakes familiarity for quality, when studios greenlight sequel after sequel chasing nostalgia dollars and end up diluting the very magic they were trying to capture. There's something genuinely radical about 2 men saying, "No, we're done." And that's the point. It would have been easy to say yes. Spectacularly easy. The money would have been extraordinary. The attention would have been guaranteed. But Bob Gale and Robert Zemeckis understood something that most of Hollywood has forgotten. Not every story needs a new chapter. Some stories are already perfect because they ended when they did. Because the creators respected the audience enough to give them a real conclusion. Because they care more about the work than the paycheck. And Michael J. Fox, a man who has faced challenges that most of us will never fully comprehend, with grace and humor and extraordinary dignity, deserves to have his defining role remembered exactly as it was. Vibrant, electric, timeless. Marty McFly doesn't need to come back. He never really left. Every time someone watches that DeLorean hit 88 miles per hour for the first time, it's 1985 again. Every time a kid discovers Doc Brown in a garage full of clocks, the magic is completely, perfectly intact. Maybe that's the real lesson from Back to the Future. Maybe the greatest thing a creator can do is know when the story is complete. Maybe the bravest thing in Hollywood isn't making the sequel everyone's been asking for. Maybe it's having the courage to say, "We already told you everything we had to say, and we told it well." Because in the end, maybe the real lesson from Back to the Future is knowing when a story has already reached the perfect ending.